Thank you for joining IAB There.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to IAB There, our regular show in which we connect the digital advertising industry. It's been less than 50 days into the Biden administration, new year, new administration, new Congress, but our issues have not changed. The question is, how has the Biden administration changed how we should be responding to our issues? So I'm thrilled that we will be joined today by Dave Grimaldi, our EVP of Public Policy. He's a frequent guest here at IB There, and a new guest, Jeff Murray, who is our brand spanking new VP of Public Policy on Dave's team. Let's bring them both into the. All right, Dave, welcome back to IB There. Jeff, welcome to IB There.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
So you're new to the IAB, you're new to this audience. Tell us about yourself. What were you doing before, and what are your main concerns now that you're here?
Sure. So I think I've been in politics for about a decade and a half now. Previously served as the head of Republican outreach for Accenture for several years before I had this opportunity. Before that, I practiced law. I worked in the Senate. I worked in the House. I did some boutique political consulting, so I've done a little bit of everything. And I'm excited to be here to try and represent all of the IAB companies and try and push the ball forward a little bit on national privacy reform, which is a priority for all of them. So now for me.
So you both are representing the industry. You're both working for IAB. Jeff, you are a registered Republican. Dave, my memory is that you're a registered Democrat. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep. A number of Democratic roles in government leading up until now. That's right.
So we have a built-in point counterpoint that we can dig into. So Jeff, let's start with you. As I said, we're less than 50 days into the Biden administration. What are you seeing?
Sure. I think the number one thing is it's all about COVID all the time. I think the primary lens that you're seeing both the administration and frankly, both parties in Congress focus is on what can we do about COVID. There are a lot of different facets of that. I think the number one is, what are they doing on testing and response? How are they getting people online? How are we responding? There are a lot of elements under that in how are all of those things happening and how is everybody getting organized? But you kind of have some big fault lines after that big goal of wanting to help between Republicans and Democrats and how to go about that. So, as Dave can attest, the administration wants to move forward. They have President Biden's 1.9 trillion spending package that is considerable, and you have Republicans who, on the other hand, are saying, we'd like a little more targeted relief. So before we could even get to anything else, that will need to be resolved. But there are a lot of technological components to what happens in administering COVID relief.
So our industry issues are secondary to all things are basically behind COVID, is what you're saying, including our industry issues, which extend, quite a bit beyond COVID. Dave, do you agree? Do you want to build on anything that Jeff just said?
I completely agree. No, Jeff hit the nail on the head. It is analogous to when the Obama administration followed the Bush administration and inherited the subprime mortgage meltdown and all of the cleanup that really eclipsed what a president historically does in their first 100 days, where they roll out their agenda, they have big announcements, they get their cabinet secretaries confirmed, they're riding the honeymoon wave after the inauguration. We certainly didn't see that, or we're not seeing that now with President Biden having to wend his way through the COVID relief labyrinth. We didn't really see it in 2016 when Donald Trump was inaugurated following a horrendous and ghastly election cycle between he and Hillary Clinton. And again, with President Obama and the bank meltdown. It's really a disturbing trend. Hopefully, whenever the administration changes next, based on your politics, if that's in 4 years or 8 years, that we will see a new leader of American government come in and actually be able to say, here's who I am and here's what I want to push forward, instead of first press conference, second to fifth press conference, we're bailing water out of the boat. We think we've got this thing seaworthy again, hang on, vaccines, bank bailouts. It's unfortunate for any president, regardless of party, to have to to have to deal with this. But as Jeff said, this is the name of the game right now. And I think that for any White House press conference, the president at the podium over the presidential seal, he's going to be talking about COVID. Big announcements in other parts of government and diplomacy are slowly rolling out and grabbing headlines. Today, news about Saudi Arabia and our relations with them. But I think right now, Joe Biden is just engulfed in COVID messaging and COVID action.
So, so essentially, what you're saying is that the most civility we can expect between Republicans and Democrats is what we're seeing right here on this screen with the two of you. But let's keep going, because a lot's happening at the state and municipal level. It's not all federal. Dave, let's start with you, which is the Maryland digital ad tax. There's been some movement on that. What is it for the people in the audience who don't know what this is, and what are we doing about it or trying to help with?
Sure. The Maryland ad tax really is, we have Brad, just to kind of expand a little bit on the question to rope in an analogous piece here. We had a state privacy bill be introduced and passed over the past 2 years that ran ahead of anything Congress is doing, California Consumer Protection Act, CCPA. It really took the industry by surprise, because we look for Congress to set national policy. California ran ahead and did it. The congressional committees tasked with overseeing privacy are working hard, but consensus is difficult. This is an instance that is not analogous to a states versus federal piece, but it's something emerging in the states that our industry is going to see likely proliferate via copycat bills nationwide. So another component of IAB's advocacy and what we do and how we interface with governments at the state and federal level, where we are directing a lot of attention to state action. The Maryland Privacy Bill is a new tax on digital advertising that is seeking to fill a hole that was created by COVID deficits and other municipal spending that started when the pandemic descended on us. And it really is something that is going to take small businesses in Maryland, and by extension, I think nationwide, as we see these bills move more, by surprise. Because right when you are trying to recover from debts that you have incurred as a small 7-person bakery retailer in downtown Annapolis, Maryland, all of a sudden there could be a new tax that is placed on you for the right reasons, municipal services, schools, sanitation funding, firemen, police officers, et cetera. But it is a business to business tax when you look at its impact on digital advertising. And that's not something that we normally see passed down to the consumer. That's what's going to happen in this instance. And its sponsor in the Maryland State Senate has really said as much, which is disheartening and deflating to Marylanders and Maryland businesses, that we know this tax will be passed down by businesses to consumers and buyers. And we're already seeing copycats spring up. So it's another flank that IAB's 600 plus member companies have to deal with. Certainly not our top 5 companies, but our long tail companies all the way down to those smaller blogs and those smaller sellers that monetize with online ads. This is a sign of more to come after a very, very difficult year.
Jeff, what's the nightmare scenario here? It sounds like copycats, but am I right that it's at the state level? Could this proliferate down to county municipal level? Like what's the worst case scenario?
It could. The real nightmare scenario is not only what you said, that it could be broken down into more state and local level, and you have fragmentation between states, but fragmentation even further in municipal units. But it's more that if you look at the CCPA and the legislation that recently passed the Virginia state legislature on privacy, you have very similar approaches in theory, but very different approaches in practice. And what that means is that you as a business will have to treat your customers, consumers differently when it comes to advertising and when it comes to your internet experience between California and Virginia if the legislation is signed that's it's expected to be on the governor's desk very soon. And that's a huge compliance problem for businesses to worry more about that than their customers. And it can be, a very expensive legal issue if you get any of that wrong. And so those are things that depress business and that businesses should not be worried about as much as they should about serving their customers, about growing their jobs base, and about making contributions to the economy that can help make a huge part of the COVID recovery that everyone is looking for.
And
So you
Brad,
pivoted in your answer. Oh, go ahead, Dave. I'm sorry.
one more word, if I may. There will be a legal challenge. There already is a legal challenge to the Maryland ad tax. I believe that there will be more on the constitutionality of the tax, how it deals with interstate commerce, how it deals with tax fairness laws. But it was just conceived for the right reasons, but it was directed at the wrong industry and done in a way that just didn't take into account the collateral damage and the unintended consequences. This was something that was proposed by their own admission to go after big tech, to put the tax burden on the Googles, the Amazons of the world. But the Maryland State Assembly and the State Senate, they swung at them and they missed, and they're hitting their constituents. And that is unfortunate. And we are holding the hands of IB companies and working with our sister trade associations across the whole advertising space to figure out how to deal with the fallout.
So, Jeff, you mentioned compliance as a big burden. Do you have any sense of predictions about or preferences around, who's accountable for compliance? Is it the advertiser? Is it the agency? Is it the platform? Like, I don't even think we know whose job it is yet.
Well, and that's one of the difficult parts is you have different states taking different approaches. At least in California, for a limited category, the laws can be enforced by the administration, specifically by the Attorney General, and that was taken. Similar approaches taken in Virginia, but there are several states that have put forward legislation specifically on privacy, where they would allow for private rights of action. So in other words, on top of government typical law enforcement, individual citizens can sue, sometimes for very hefty penalties for, either very dense, difficult to parse concepts, or just for, inadvertent errors. And these could be costly business ending errors. So, one of the biggest problems is that you don't have a consistency in approach, and it's that uncertainty that makes businesses pull back and that make them not want to fully engage in commerce, which, as I talked about earlier, we want all the businesses leaning forward as hard as possible to help people, protect people, and to put the economy back on a good footing and to give more people jobs. And when that's what they're worried about, you're just going to see less of that.
Well, as many people know, I live in the state of Oregon, and the state of Washington is about a 20-minute drive from my home. I believe that Washington is one of the states that's also making some moves on privacy regulation. Jeff, can you tell us about what that's about?
Sure. It's, it is another state that is debating really hard about how they want to enforce privacy rights. And so far, they have not chosen to go the route of private right of action. We really hope that they will continue not to do that. But there is a heavy debate between some organizations, who are kind of more consumer friendly and argue that that is the only way to effectively enforce the law. Whereas businesses say, this has traditionally been the responsibility of law enforcement and of the government, and that it is adequately protected both by, federal consumer laws and by local consumer laws. And specifically for this, there's no reason to think that that's a necessary means of enforcement, that it's basically an extra layer that imposes costs and burdens, but is not getting anything extra for consumers out of it.
So, Dave, on February 25th, you had an op-ed in Advertising Age about the one solution to the patchwork, which is a federal privacy law that would, take over and subsume all of the state laws. Tell us about the op-ed and tell us about what it all means.
Right. No, Brad, it's something that we have been saying at IAB for some time now. It's something that a cross-industry group of companies and other associations are pushing Congress to lean in on. And that is just piggybacking off of what Jeff just said, to get serious, roll up their sleeves, and pass a comprehensive preemptive privacy law of the land that will give certainty to consumers, entrepreneurs, small businesses, and everything in between. And the complexity of it, the complexity of tackling these issues is one that is unfortunately forcing Congress to kind of put it off to the side, especially as we discussed with COVID legislation and other bigger ticket saving America items. This is one where figuring out a safe consumer protective way forward to dynamically reshape the, by all accounts, broken opt-in and consent regime is one where the speed of innovation makes it difficult to rein in, to write legislative language around notice and consent that is going to be meaningful and that doesn't destabilize the online economy and the way online ads are used to build all of these businesses. One of the pieces I noted in the op-ed and a key messaging point of ours is to abandon that broken notice and choice regime. What we're doing in our coalition, Privacy for America, is to define and enshrine in draft legislation and hopefully forevermore and prohibit practices that put personal data at risk and undermine accountability. So there should be no-brainer sets of the uses of data or the practices around using data in certain ways that truly run afoul of user expectation and comfort, the sharing of sensitive medical information, things along those lines, that Congress should be able to say, okay, we agree on this, let's put that in a draft bill, lock that piece of the bill and throw away the key. It's difficult to get consensus even around things of that sort. And another piece is moving more deliberately toward pseudonymized and anonymized data to identify Americans and improve their online experiences. Instead of using names and addresses, et cetera, for targeting reasons, to use a string of numbers, anonymized data, so that it's not Jeff Murray who clicked on that ad to view that product. It's 10 numbers in a row that preserve his identity and his personal information. So we're really, really moving on Congress in this new 117th session that just began to take these issues seriously, and for the White House to lean in this year that Democrats have under a unified Democratic banner running the White House and the Senate and the House to make big bets along these lines. Come February of next year at this time, we are going to be in the swirl of the midterm elections coming in November of 2022, and then partisan rancor creeps in, positioning, fundraising, everything else. This really is a pivotal year in order for us to run ahead and put something in place at the federal level.
I haven't, I will say, seen partisan rancor creep out yet, but we can always hope. But Jeff, from the other side, you two have been so civil and agreeing on so much that I'm rather disappointed. Is there anything that Dave just said that you disagree with? Do you think that the Democrats can get it together to do something with a 51-50 margin in the Senate, a little bit more in the House? Like, what is your prediction about the unified government's ability to get something done?
I'm going to beat Jeff to the lazy answer, which is Democrats can get elected, but they can't govern. So Jeff, if you want to, let's just throw that on the table, because yes, I'm sure it's swimming around in your head.
Come on, David. It's only been a handful of weeks. I mean, I'll at least give you a little bit more rope than that. Let's get to the 100-day mark and see where things stand.
Very good.
But, to your point, Brad, I think the biggest challenge is going to be having an evenly divided Senate, having a really closely divided House, which is not something that has happened in a very long time. The last time the Senate was that closely divided was 2001. And what it effectively means is, even with the narrow margins in the House, the Speaker can largely pass what she can hold her caucus together for. But when it gets to the Senate, if you don't have Republican support, if it is an even tie, the vice president can come in and break a tie. But if you even lose one Democratic vote on anything, that, and that's just at a majority threshold. Like currently, process called reconciliation is happening to pass the president's COVID relief, and that only requires a majority. So if all the Democrats hold together, the vice president can break a tie. However, anything that does not go through that process, which is typically 98 and 99% of any legislation, which would include privacy or anything related, that's going to require 60 votes. And that means that you need to have the support of 10 Republicans, even if the House can get together and pass a bill that is agreeable to Democrats. And that's just a really high burden to jump over. If you look just at the past couple of weeks, there were 10 Republicans who presented an alternative plan on COVID relief to President Biden, and he chose not to engage in that discussion, and Democrats in the Senate moved forward with a plan that is so far only supported by Democrats. So I think that's an example of the uphill road that you're going to have even to pass legislation just at a majority threshold, much less have 60 votes, which is where any legislation that doesn't directly deal with the budget and taxing and spending is going to have to be.
So I want to take a quick sidebar for a PSA, which is that, Dave and Jeff spend their waking hours on the Hill, either virtually or really, although quite a bit virtually, I think, the last year, talking about these issues. I will pull them in here or on our podcast as often as I can. There aren't a lot of opportunities for the industry at large to engage with them and figure out, well, what are you going to do about it? And how can you help? And one of those opportunities is coming up at ALM, which is the annual leadership meeting, which starts on March 8th and goes until March 12th. And so I want to pivot now and talk a little bit about the policy implications, the policy topics that you're going to be covering and that we'll all be discussing at ALM. And let's start on Monday. We're very excited to have Senator Ron Wyden, my senator here in Oregon. He's going to be sitting down for an interview with our exec chair, Randall Rothenberg, and there's going to be a Q&A with him for some of our delegates afterward. Dave, to you, why is Senator Wyden so important to our industry, and what are you hoping that he'll say in his chat with Randy?
Well, he has only risen in prominence in the U.S. Senate just through hard work and determination, and he is one of the more progressive liberal voices. He really knows his stuff. He's now, since the Democrats took control of Congress, chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, so he sits on top of so many industries in that regard. But one of he is not on the Senate Commerce Committee, but he certainly plays in the issues and really guides the dialogue with his fiery, I say that in the best way, fiery rhetoric and just admonishments to our industry about what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. And what he is hoping to do very soon is to release a new piece of legislation, literally entitled "The Fourth Amendment is Not for Sale Act." And the senator has seen through our conversations with his staff and with him that law enforcement is availing itself of private companies' collections of data and using it for targeting, geolocation purposes, etc., that the senator feels is skirting around the Fourth Amendment and its tenets of due process, etc. The bill would ban government agencies such as law enforcement from purchasing people's data and obtaining their personal information. And that's important because the senator started to get his radar up around this following the protests after the George Floyd tragedy. And companies were releasing the breakdowns of demographic data at the protests. And Senator Wyden sat back with Senator Elizabeth Warren and others and said, where is that information going? Why are companies releasing demographic breakdowns of the protesters? How do they even know that? Is that information then going to go to the Immigration and Naturalization Service? Is it going to go to Customs and Border Protection? Is it going to go to Homeland Security? And when they have it, then what are they going to do? What conclusions might they draw about Americans lawfully and legally protesting in a at times political manner, in a politically charged way? So how does that happen? And surveillance is surveillance, the senator says, and he wants to close any loopholes. One of his biggest phrases is constitutional rights ought to vanish when the government uses a credit card instead of a court order. And so that is part and parcel of what he wants to do with this bill, to restrict government from going to private vendors and buying essentially and subscribing to troves of personal data. So I think the senator really will touch on that at ALM.
So help me to understand how this affects our members. I mean, which includes, Procter and Gamble trying to sell, to advertise Tide online. It also includes, myriad publishers, CNN. So because at first blush, it seems that the misuse of data by companies around the protests doesn't necessarily connect obviously to advertising. Jeff, do you want to take that one? Like, why? How does that connect to the pressing issues for the IAB?
Well, I'm happy to let Dave continue in that train.
Yeah, it is. He has said, well, Wyden is also a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee. He's more privy to information on data brokers selling American user data, and he has said that what the general public is informed of is the, to use his language, the tip of the iceberg. It's not directly, Brad, to your point, around digital advertising per se, but digital advertising companies do collect data to do personalized ads, to serve those ads and make them relevant for consumers. Anyone just perusing any website. He wants to make sure that data collected and packaged into profiles of users is not something that the US government or law enforcement can just say, I'll take those 6,000 names, I'll buy another list from X vendor or X company, and then all of the data that is rolled into however companies collect it can then just be used by the government in any way it wishes to. He wants to put a little clarity and a little guardrail, some guardrails around that.
So in other words, I think just if I may for a moment, Jeff, it sounds like what you're saying is that the reason it impacts the IAB members is that, the lowering tide can shipwreck all of the boats when it comes to the kinds of data that can be captured. So is that a fair assessment? Correct.
And it also goes more broadly to the erosion of trust that we are seeing around all things digital, all things tech, antitrust scrutiny, censorship, online platforms being a new haven for sharing insightful and racist speech. And so Wyden is just looking at stamping out or putting restrictions on certain things just to make sure that the government is being the cop on the beat. I think that it is supposed to be. But you're correct. You don't want to be overly broad in passing legislation that is in an unintended way going to stave off the lawful sharing and the lawful monetizing of data to allow the next great platform to flourish, the next great sharing economy company to come into existence. So that's why Jeff and I are here working with these offices. The devil is always in the details of these draft bills to get it right.
Jeff, I interrupted you. Please forgive me. You were going to say something a moment ago.
No, the only thing that I was going to tag on at the end is, since we've talked about lots of the ways that you can have some bipartisan diversions. You look at somebody like Senator Mike Lee, who is one of the more traditionally conservative senators in the Senate, versus Senator Wyden, who's more progressive. They have worked very well together on basically the issue of the threshold of when a warrant should be required for when you can get a certain information and certain data, like in the FISA context in the past. So there is some bipartisan interest in this issue. Just to Dave's point, we should make sure that it's done in a measured way, in a way that's not harmful to lawful businesses.
So that is on Monday. We also have a policy summit all day on Friday, March 12th. And Dave, we have two exciting primetime speakers. One is Representative Clyburn, and the other is the brand new FCC Commissioner. Can you tell us about those two sessions? And then Jeff, I'll ask you to kind of walk us through the guts of the the rest of that day, which is, again, just for the people out there in the audience for IAB There, if you want to understand why these issues are important, how they affect your ability to run your business, then you should be, checking out www.iab.com/ALM and signing up. But Jeff, talk with us about the two other primetime speakers on the 12th, and then I'll turn it to Jeff.
Sure. The Jim Clyburn, Congressman from South Carolina, is joining us to talk about the year that he has been through. He's Majority Whip of the House, so the third ranking Democrat. Actually virtually met with his office today, hence the coat and tie, but also for IAB There, Brad. I always try to, look my best in front of you and our audience. And Congressman Clyburn is going to touch on what the pulse of Congress is with regard to our issues, social media, etc. He's going to talk about what he heard, air quotes around heard, before his endorsement of Joe Biden, that many see as the event that put Joe Biden over the top as the nominee, because he was having a tough set of primaries before South Carolina. And then Jim Clyburn said, I'm with Joe Biden, and for all of these reasons. And then Biden ran away with South Carolina. The rest is history. Jim Clyburn said America needed to hear something, and he'll go into what he thinks that was that prompted him to endorse President Biden. He'll also talk about the events of January 6th and the riot in the Capitol, and how it really changed Congress. Hopefully not forever, but certainly for the short term. And also FCC Commissioner Nathan Symington, who is the newest commissioner on the 5-person FCC leadership team, Republican. And he will talk about his thoughts on broadband deployment, Spectrum 5G, Section 230, which was all the rage last year, landed at the FCC by the designs of President Trump. The FCC said we have no jurisdiction over this, so we don't know if we can take this on or tweak it. Commissioner Symington was one of the people who has written about that, talked about that. So if Section 230 is really here to stay, and the question of liability for platforms for what users post, he is going to be in the middle of that. So he is the newest member of a very substantive regulatory agency that oversees 1/6 of the American economy.
Wow. Jeff, tell us about what else is happening on Policy Day.
Sure. One of the other things that is actually new of today that we're really excited to announce is one of our other speakers is going to be Ranking Member Kathy McMorris Rodgers. She is the brand new top Republican on the House Energy and Commerce Committee. She's the first woman ever to hold that post, and she is an ardent advocate of technology. She has been very understanding and very good to our industry in years past, and shared our goal of trying to figure out how to pass some comprehensive privacy legislation. She said that is definitely in the queue, and just as important as Chairman Pallone has said that it is. But she was also responsible for packaging a lot of other technology bills, ranging from supporting artificial intelligence, which is sometimes used in the underlying technology, and how our member companies, buy, sell, and place ads, and support other, basic R&D that is helpful to technology. So we are really excited to have her. And then we're also going to have a panel of several other folks like Dave and myself, who are longtime DC advocates who work for, whether it's a major internet company or a major retailer, or someone who measures the TV viewership of what everyone watches, pandemic or otherwise. We're really excited to talk to them about having a conversation similar today. What is happening in DC? What are the members' perspective, and how does that affect our members? Dave and I are pretty smart guys, but we don't pretend to have all of the perspective. So we're very happy to widen the lens. And even though everybody is a little bit of a technology company these days, we're really excited to have some differing perspectives on what to look out for in Washington and the impact that it can have on the marketing and advertising industry as a whole.
Well, it's going to be an exciting week. Friday the 12th is going to be an exciting day. I'm grateful to both of you for joining us here on IAB There to give everybody a sneak preview, and also to talk about, as we have been talking about, the first 50 or so days of the Biden administration. So thank you so very much. I'm going to go to the credits now, which is that IAB There is a production of the Interactive Advertising Bureau. Our show today was produced by Connor Healy and John Ward. I'm Brad Behrens, editor-in-chief here at the IAB. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.
IAB's next big event is ALM, the annual leadership meeting running the week of March 8th. To find out more, visit www.iab.com